The show truly shines when the dwarves take center stage with their rich culture and complex characters, and this episode delivers exactly that. Add to that a renewed focus on the intricate power play between Sauron and Celebrimbor, and we get a narrative that's both gripping and profound, a combination that elevates the entire season. Do be sure to stay tuned until the end, where both Lauren and I will address some of the recent trolling and gatekeeping that's been going hand in hand with the Rings of Power Season 2. We are in the home straight. We are nearly at 50,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you all enough for that. So please don't hesitate. Hit that subscribe button. It's free. It helps me so much to keep bringing you the content that I think you're enjoying. Let's get back to the video. In this episode, we see the masterclass in manipulation that Sauron performs on Celebrimbor, with tension slowly rising between the two of them like a pot reaching its boiling point. The episodes begin with subtle cues. Celebrimbor, ever the perceptive smith, hints that he's aware of Sauron's ability to twist words to serve his own ends. Yet Sauron, ever the master deceiver, doesn't confront this suspicion directly. Instead, he works behind the scenes, slowly turning the other smiths against Celebrimbor. One by one, they begin to question their leader's judgment, with Sauron quietly sowing seeds of doubt. The manipulation reaches a fever pitch when Sauron gaslights Celebrimbor, leading him to believe that he is responsible for the failure of the Dwarven Rings, all because they were, as Sauron puts it, imbued with deceit. It's a stunning moment of psychological warfare. Celebrimbor, normally so resolute, begins to question his own competence and intentions. Sauron's power isn't in overt force, but in the subtlety with which he twists truth into doubt and doubt into guilt. By the end of the episode, we see the full effect of Sauron's machinations. He has Celebrimbor cornered, mentally exhausted, and emotionally compromised, and finally manipulates him into agreeing to forge the Nine Rings for mortal men. A decision that will have catastrophic consequences for Middle-earth. This gradual descent into manipulation captures Sauron's true menace, not just as a dark sorcerer, but as a puppet master pulling the strings of one of the greatest elven smiths, ever using fear, doubt, and deceit to pave his path to domination. I love this episode for that reason, dude. It played it so well. It was joyous. And I said it on the last video. When Gandalf and the hobbits are not in the show, it's better for it. It just is.
It definitely had its moments. It really did have its moments. I mean, I won't go into now what ruined it for me, but we will come to that, I'm sure. But there were some really significant moments. And just like with your Game of Thrones or your House of the Dragons, it's that kind of almost a down episode of more explaining and story building. And obviously it does need that. It just wasn't one of my favorites so far. But I think maybe that's because there have been some absolutely epic episodes. So if you're going to rate them against each other in moments and things like that, it's probably just a bit lower down. I didn't hate it. It just wasn't one of my favorites.
Look, I said last week that when you weren't around, that it's when Sauron is doing his puppetry in the background that the show really is at its best. Listen, is there something to be said that symbiote Sauron that we got in episode 1 was a bit weird? Yes, 100% sure. When I saw that, I was like, what are we doing here? Why is Sauron black goop? This doesn't feel right. Look, we've moved past this. We're now at a stage where he's pulling the strings. And the fact that when I look in the comment sections at some of the trolls, one of the worst things that people said is, I don't like Celebrimbor's hair. I'm like, oh, okay. That's the same level as it's the same level as Donald Trump attacking Kamala Harris's laugh. It's like, that's the best you got, really? Okay, have fun with that one.
Yeah, people are eating dogs and cats as well. Remember?
Oh yeah, man. Like I feel like Donald Trump he's been watching Paw Patrol. He's like, oh my god, they've got dogs being firemen. Totally wrong. I feel like he's watching the wrong show.
I didn't know you could do that good of a Donald Trump impression. I feel like we need to do an episode of the debate. But yeah, let's move on from that because that's a deeper discussion.
Totally useless. Doesn't know what's going on. Being played. What a fool.
This might now have to be a thing.
Listen, everything. Do you know what I thought was really cool? Also, that I didn't touch on just now in the kind of preview for this section, showing us someone in the Shadow Realm, but from this realm's perspective. Because normally, you put on the ring, you go invisible. That's what we've seen in Lord of the Rings, like and you see all of that shadow world that Sauron inhabits when he's the big eye wreathed in flame. But it was very cool to see what it looks like in a non-cartoonish way, instead of having people literally, moving around invisible.
Yeah,
just
really
seeing that
good.
hammer moving around. I was like, what's going on with the hammer? And then I was like, oh, someone's put on a ring.
Yeah.
It clicked, and then it came out. I was like, that's cool, man. I dig that.
Straight away,
really
we couldn't work out what was happening either. We thought it was like some of those effects that they were experiencing when they were first trying to merge the metals, and it was affecting the tools and things like that. But it reminded me of WandaVision, when they do that incredible episode where they literally do everything live, where they moved everything around, and it had that sort of similar effect when you realize what was happening. But obviously there's the difference in the showing the different worlds, but that was really cool. Really, really cool.
Do you agree that this is some of the best stuff they've done with Sauron and Celebrimbor so far?
In that respect, yeah, from that perspective, because obviously it's building. We know what it's going to accumulate to, but I don't think that matters. It's the storytelling element of it that's really interesting, and how they're kind of building that. It's almost like they're both playing each other, but ultimately we know which way it'll go. But the way they're writing that story and building that side of the story is really interesting.
The deceit that I just brought up in particular, I really, really did like the way that he sort of held a mirror up to Celebrimbor, who previously had said to him, like, you do have a way with words, don't you, of using people's words against them. Like, he does say it in one of the early scenes. So it's like you kind of get that insinuation of, are you aware of what's going on here? And you're just using him. But then, Sauron holds that mirror up to him and he's like, well, the rings didn't work, not because I did something wrong to them, but because we did. And then you realize, oh damn, he's actually telling the truth. It's like, you lied to your king to make these rings. You've literally beautiful manipulation. I mean, beautiful. You've literally imbued the rings with deceit, and that's why they're playing out. And then you sort of see Celebrimbor going, oh damn, he's got a point. Not acknowledging the fact that to get to the point where he was making the rings, Sauron manipulated him into that too. That I love this master manipulator at work.
Very clever. Very. Yeah, huge gaslighting, narcissism, manipulation, all characteristic traits that you experience in real people that they've kind of put into this darkly evil character. It's very clever.
Yeah. And even the way he's turning the Smith, sort of toying and playing with and almost flirting with that Lady Smith, right? It's like, oh, you almost look like Galadriel. It's like, oh, I see what you're doing. You dirty, I can't swear. But yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on in this episode is the dwarves, because I thought that was stellar. So turning to the dwarves, Episode 5 delivers some of the most compelling moments of the season, starting with Durin Sr. during the third receiving his Ring of Power. This is a pivotal event, marking a significant turn for the Dwarves of Khazad Dum. The ring initially appears to empower Durin, giving him the uncanny ability to locate the mountain's weak spots, a gift that seems almost providential as it allows him to further his people's quest for Mithril, or in this case, to get light back into the mountain for their crops and secure their future. But with this newfound power comes a creeping sense of corruption, subtly echoed in Durin's behavior. We witness a haunting, almost Gollum-like moment, a stark deviation from his previous demeanor, as he clutches with the ring with an almost obsessive desperation, muttering, "Where is it?" It's a chilling scene that underscores the corruptive influence of the ring, slowly chipping away at Durin's once noble spirit. This isn't a full transformation, but the seeds of change are clearly planted, and it's a moment that foreshadows the darker path ahead. Meanwhile, Disa, ever the perceptive and cunning dwarf, and I know some people are going to absolutely hate me saying that, makes a discovery of her own. A secret chamber deep within the mines. The very sight of this place, with its shadowed recesses and unnatural stillness, teases a much darker presence. The Balrog is coming. It's a thrilling tease filled with a sense of impending doom. Disa, aware of an impending danger, warns Durin against going deeper, sensing a malevolent force lurking just beyond. But the ring, in all its seductive power, pushes Durin to defy these warnings. Driven by ambition and perhaps the ring's growing influence, he orders the miners to continue digging deeper, leading them toward an inevitable encounter with the Balrog. This defiance sets up the tragic fall of Khazad Dum, a narrative thread rich in dramatic irony. We, the audience, know the dark fate that awaits them, and yet we see Durin, now blinded by the ring's influence, marching his people closer to their doom. It's a powerful setup, blending the allure of power with the dread of inevitable loss. And it anchors the dwarven subplot with emotional gravity and foreboding tension that keeps us hooked. Tell me you didn't like this.
I did like this. I did.
I
like everything to do with the dwarves. I think like one of my, and we'll go into this a bit more later, but my favorite things about the entire show is the production design and the cinematography, and I think it lends itself massively to the world that they've built. I've got to admit, at times it does remind me a bit of Fraggle Rock, but I love that about it. I've got to be honest. It's just a great story to be told, and the way that they tell it and the way that things come out, and describing her as cunning as well, I don't think is an insult. I think she knows how to play the system and the dynamic between family and state, and she's not a bad person, she's not a bad character. She wants the best for everything that's involved, and obviously she has her own senses and her own powers and everything like that, and she's just trying to bring everything forward to move everything in the right direction. So I wouldn't say, as much as some people might not like you describing her that way, I don't think that's an insult to the character at all. I think it's a positive thing. I think she needs to be.
No, but audience members may think that's an insult to their intelligence because, we don't like the Black Dwarf in some corners of the internet. Listen, on that note, there is... Listen, on that note, there is something to be said that one person actually managed to raise a valid point in the comment section last week. My apologies if I'm slightly misquoting you, but it resonated. These aren't nations that are being represented. They're races, There was an element of, I don't mind black elves, I don't mind black dwarves, I mind a black dwarf, I mind a black elf. And when you actually, that was one of the few kind of comments I saw that I thought, hang on, that's not someone just being overtly racist. There's actually logic in that,
Yeah,
the hobbits are a race, the dwarves are a race, And we're not talking
like, why are we having just one singular black dwarf rather than having a mixture of skin color?
It's like,
I get
correct.
That.
It's like, by all means, race swap them, make the dwarves entirely black. Although I still think it would make more sense to make the elves entirely black than the dwarves. But melanin in the skin, the dwarves live underground, doesn't entirely make sense. I feel so nervous even talking about this because I'm going to annoy both sides with this. I still remain very much in the center. I get where people are coming from when they say a singular race swapped character doesn't make the world of sense. Make it make sense. Race swap all of them. Yeah. Make the entire nation of dwarves a different color, but at least have them all the same color then. Be consistent.
But do they have to be?
Well, it's a race.
Do they have to be?
But it's the equivalent of saying are all Caucasian. It's like saying are all Caucasian people white. It's like, well, yeah, that's the race. You're Caucasian, therefore you're white.
It seems to be a bit of a ball drop, doesn't it? Like you say, if it's supposed to be a race, I suppose everyone has to be the same race.
And in the same way, literally,
and in the same way they differentiate between those races and those nations with accents, which I love, and obviously that carries on from the original Lord of the Rings film. And obviously she does have that Scottish accent, which all the dwarves have. But yeah, it's funny because I'm literally just speaking this now as we're talking about it, because this has just blown my mind. It's not, and I don't know if that's a bad thing that it didn't occur to me, because I just focus on her as a character and I just think she's a great character. But have they organized that diversity with the right thinking and with the right intent? That's a question.
Intent, I'm not even going to open up that can of worms. Who knows? Focusing on the story, I did think what was annoying about the discovery of the Balrog chamber for me, at least I think it's the Balrog chamber, it looks like the Balrog chamber, inside the chamber itself, good, everything worked. Her doing her mountain sing and then getting a response which was clearly ominous and evil, that all worked. It was everything that led up to her discovering that chamber that I thought was a little bit Scooby-Doo. You know, it's like I dropped the ball that I've just bought from the market, and then, oh, shiver me timbers, it looks like I've got to now chase this ball through the market. Oh, look, a magical chamber. It felt Scooby-Doo-ish, is my point.
Is there anything wrong with a little bit of Scooby-Doo, though? Because I think that little kind of friendly anticipation, see, that didn't stick out to me as like poor writing or anything. We'll get onto that bit later. But I quite liked what it was building to. And also, for the more kind of casual watcher of it that isn't overly familiar with what they might find or anything like that, it is a bit more kind of like, oh, what's going on here? I kind of liked it. I didn't dislike it anyway.
Yeah, see that again, we're going to differ there. It stuck out to me quite badly, that scene. I was like, come on. We don't need to go down the tongue-in-cheek, almost slapstick comedy route to get to the Balrog. It's like, just
think of it
drop
this
the
way.
ball and walk. You don't need to go, oh, excuse me. Oh, coming through. Oh, dear, I dropped it. It's like, come on. You're like the Mad Hatter. Oh, mustard, don't let me silly. It's like, come on.
It started, though, because she was drawn to this crystal. There was a reason why she was drawn to this crystal. It's almost like this crystal had power in it of itself to actually do that, because it was leading this magical being to something she needed to see. So if you look at it in a deeper way, rather than just the obvious Scooby-Doo-ness of it, like there's a little bit, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And I think that's why I enjoyed it.
No, the messaging is deeper. The execution is my issue. It's like, you could have had the depth that you're talking about, have her drop it and not do the whole, pardon me, coming through. I'm like, you didn't need to do that.
I know what you mean.
The scene with Durin Sr. during the third and losing his ring, I thought that was brilliant. Not him just going through the whole, where is it? Where have I put it? You took it from me. I was like, well, we've seen this before. And what I loved about that is that that type of behavior has always been, from what we've seen on screen, synonymous with the One Ring. You know, Sauron's ring, aka Frodo's ring, if you want to be more obvious. It's really cool to see that that type of malevolence permeates all the rings, and especially not just the whole kind of junky aspect of it. Like, I need my hit. Where's my ring? Where's my precious type thing? But the fact that his was it Norde, his lieutenant basically says,
yeah,
you took it off, my king. You said it was heavy, and I'm like, so we've not only got the junky aspect, but yeah. So it's not just the junky aspect of it, but it's the weight of the ring too. Like, they all have this evil in them. I was like, that's a nice touch,
and
man.
It gave that whole impression of like the heaviness isn't just the physical heaviness, and it's adding to those. They're not subtle as such, but they're not like really prominent. But there's all of these things happening in all the different stories that are showing the build of evil in every corner of the world, and everybody who's around these rings, but even the people who aren't around the rings are feeling that build of evil. So that really added to that build, and it was very prominent. Probably one of my favorite moments in the episode, actually. Like, very prominent.
I thought it was great. And yeah, I think during the fourth, so during Junior, I mean, he still remains the smartest damn character in the entire show. When he goes to Eregion and confronts Celebrimbor and goes, how much do you actually know about Pretty Boy up in the tower? Like, how much do you know about Anatar? We're building rings with this guy. Do we know him? And he's the only one who's actually come out and said that. And I love the fact that he said, like, my dad is many things. Greedy is not one of them. What I love about that is that if you think about the Fellowship of the Ring, when Saruman has like created the storm over Caradhras, the mountain, and he knows that Gandalf has to go through Moria, and there's that brilliant part where he's reading his book going, Moria, you fear to go in there, Gandalf. And he says the dwarves delve too deep, too greedily, and too deep. And it's like, so there's an association with that too. It's like, so actually it wasn't that they were greedy, it's that these bloody rings corrupted them and brought their greed out, and it's the rings that made them actually bring the Balrog out and go that deep. And I was like, I don't know how you can not like this. Like, I know that there is a legion of people out there who hate this show. I don't see how you can watch scenes like this and go, this is garbage. And I'm like,
it's I mean, we will come to this, but it's just pure gatekeeping. People wanting carbon copies of the original films. That's never what this was supposed to be. We'll come back to that.
An aberration of Tolkien's work. Man, shut up. Ugh. Anyway, the dwarves, the dwarf stuff is great in this episode. Now, I want to talk a little bit about themes, because this episode is deeply threaded with the theme of loyalty to family versus loyalty to the state, a conflict that permeates the narrative from the depths of Khazad Dum to the shores of Numenor. For the dwarves, the conflict is embodied in the dynamic between Durin III and his son. Durin must grapple with the weight of his father's expectations and the demands of leadership, while Durin's loyalty to his people compels him to heed the king's counsel and pursue Mithril for their survival. His bond with Disa reveals a different kind of loyalty, one driven by love and concern for their family's future. The tension escalates as Durin's choices begin to reflect an internal struggle. Should he remain true to his father's edicts, or follow his instincts, which might doom his kin but also honor their familial bond? Meanwhile, across the seas in Numenor, we witness a similar struggle unfold with Elendil and his daughter Arianne. Elendil is torn between his duty as a captain and his love for his family, especially as he confronts Arianne's defiance. Arianne's involvement with Pharazôn's political ambitions pulls her away from her father and his teachings, creating a rift between her loyalty and her family and her newfound devotion to Numenor's future. And I think this leads us nicely into a point where we can talk about your most hated part of the entire episode. So here you go. I've laid it out for you. You got Numenor, you got Isildur. Go. It's not
just
Isildur,
to touch
Elendil,
on what you were
sorry.
saying there. She's probably one of my least favorite characters because I just think she's not that bright. And I think she's very easily led. I don't think she's a bad person, but she really annoys me. And she has done ever since she found the...
And she's a great character, mate.
But that exactly, yeah, she does exactly what she's supposed to do. Yeah, but she irritates me. But yeah, that leads into Valandil being very obviously stabbed in the what do they call it? Place of worship. Like you let me down on this. Like someone who's so insightful in TV and movies, like you're not seeing this. I know the reasons why, and I'll forgive you for it. But I couldn't believe that you didn't see this coming. It was so obvious. It was literally like textbook. Okay, have a little fight with the dweeby guy who's only got some power because he's a little dweeb with the person who's in power. Fight. Gonna kill him. Good guy says, "Don't do it. Don't do it." Stops it, throws the sword or weapon down next to the guy you were fighting with, walks away from said person, turns his back to him, and gets stabbed. Of course he does. And then straight away we were like, yes. And then he goes and falls into his arms. And it was so obvious, like to the point of that is what ruined the episode for me. Like, even though I can still highlight the excellent points we've already discussed, and you know, they were really good story arcs. It almost feels like those two scenes had completely different writers, and the one that wrote the stabbing scene needs to be fired. Like, that was poor. That was really poor. Either that, or they just run out of writing time or run out of ideas, and they need to build that story arc to give what's his face? I always forget his name. A trigger point to do something else, or a little bit of a rocket behind him to because you could see he was like dwindling a little bit, and his kind of faith was going, and his kind of desire to actually move forward and push things forward just doesn't seem to be there at the moment. And if that's part of his story to get him back there, then fair enough. Just do it better. That was really, really poor. My worst moment in all of series 1 and all of series 2 so far. Like really, really, really poor.
Well, when you put it like that.
It just really annoyed me.
Oh, really? I could not have told that. Listen, I had a very, very different experience to you with that scene. It was late at night. I'd had a 5:30 a.m. wake up because of my firstborn. I had my 6-month-old son sleeping on my chest, and he was doing a little snoring, which was gradually making me off. So that particular scene, I was absorbing like this. Hey, trying to stay awake. And then during one of the sleepy moments, I sort of woke up, and then Valandil gets stabbed. I'm like, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, you'll watch that again. Like, even if you watched it, like literally just that scene again today, you text me later and tell me that it's not obvious. Because I guarantee you that you will agree with me when you do.
Oh, I tell you what, man. Listen, the things I did like what they did with Numenor here, they had that kind of almost Dead Poet Society moment, didn't they? The "Oh, Captain, my Captain" moment. I thought that was really nice when he goes to turn in his sword, and Valandil says, "Captain leaving," and they all sort of salute him, and then Dweeby Boy, as you call him, he says he's not a captain anymore, and they basically all in a moment of solidarity and defiance all address him still as captain. I was like, nice.
And you could see that was good. That was going to build to something bad, and that's fine, because obviously you want to point in that direction if something like that's coming. That was nice. That was nicely done.
Well, you've also got to remember that it's very important that you show solidarity behind Elendil at the moment, because let's not forget, this guy turns into the leader of men. Like, this is the guy who Sauron kills in the big battle, which leads to Isildur slicing the ring from Sauron's finger. Like,
spoiler
this
for non-knowers.
If you haven't seen the first 5 minutes of a 20-year-old movie, yeah, sure. Or read the books that have been out since the 50s, yeah, sure. It's I know, right? It's he's a massively important character, and
he's a great
solidarity
character.
was important. He's a great character. I am intrigued to find out what he saw in the Palantir, because the Queen does say, I haven't been seeing the same image since you've looked into it. And I'm like, what have you seen? Because he describes that he was leaving. He describes that he was going through a forest, and then he describes that it ends. And I'm like, did you see yourself as king? And you're now afraid to say that to the Queen for fear of treason?
Possibly.
I'm like,
she might have seen him as king, and she's trying to prompt him as to, have you seen the same thing? But he's not sharing that with her, maybe.
I am curious about what we see in the Palantir, though. Listen, all in all, I think before we go into addressing some of the, I called it in the last episode, perverse gatekeeping, which upset a lot of people. Sorry. Just before we go into that, let me just give you my final thoughts on what I thought of episode 5. It, for me, stands out as the strongest of the season thus far, weaving together a compelling storylines and rich thematic undertones that elevate the series to new heights. From Sauron's subtle and sinister manipulation of Celebrimbor, revealing his mastery of deception and control, to the unfolding drama among the dwarves, where during the Third's journey with his Ring of Power offers both promise and peril, we're treated to a narrative brimming with tension and intrigue. The show's exploration of the theme of loyalty, whether to family, state, or personal ambition, resonates deeply throughout, adding a layer of complexity that enhances character motivations and conflicts. The episode thrives when it focuses on the dwarves and the tense relationship between Sauron and Celebrimbor. And it's this dual focus that has given us some of the most engaging moments so far. While still not without its flaws, and I can't emphasize that enough, the show has found its rhythm by balancing these dynamic story arcs, making us eager to see how these carefully laid out threads will come together. If this episode is any indication of what's to come, the rest of the season, for me, promises to be an exhilarating ride. I'm excited to see how the conflicts develop, especially with the looming presence of Sauron and the awakening threat of the Balrog. And I cannot wait to see what episode 6 has in store, which I imagine people are going to like because, hey, battle. And people like things that go boom.
Yeah, and that's coming as well, because that was one of those, when I say down episodes, it wasn't without, obviously, it's very key moments, but it was one of the more kind of story building, political side of things. So yeah, it should be interesting. And episode 6 in season 1 was where everything just turned on its head completely. So I would expect the same.
Yeah. We're going to get the big battle, probably the fall of Eregion, Sauron revealing himself. Does this season end with the Balrog destroying everything in Khazad Dum, or are they saving that for next season? I don't know. Keep the ball teasing coming, I say. I love it. I absolutely love it. Right, should we... How do you want to address the trolls? Are we just going to go through some of the more juicy comments? What do you feel like?
Do you think we should go specifically into comments, or just overly address?
Probably not.
Why don't you say to me, like, obviously we weren't able to, or whatever, we didn't do the first couple of episodes together, so I don't know how to say it, because obviously I only went back and watched season 1 because we were going to start reviewing, right? So it'll give me an opportunity to say I didn't watch the first season because it was panned so badly, but I went back and watched it before season 2 so we could do this together, and this is now my opinion. I don't know how to word.
I'll say this as an overall. This channel is doing what it can to be positive. Okay? My attitude to people who want to hate is very much what Gandalf says to the Balrog. Go back to the shadow. Okay? I don't really have time for hate. I certainly don't have time for hate in my favorite franchise of all time, which is The Lord of the Rings. I'm one of those people who will find joy in being in Middle-earth. I'm not going to cross-examine and dissect every single last spoken word of Tolkien's appendices and cross-reference that with have they been true to the detail. I'm interested in seeing a group of creatives come together and interpret a world and maybe give me something new. And if I don't like it, so what? I've still got the original movies. And if I didn't like those, so what? I've still got the books. This doesn't, as so many people have said, ruin Tolkien's work, or doesn't destroy Lord of the Rings, or is an aberration from Amazon. It's like, guys, can you calm down? Like, don't get me wrong. I am all about saying to you guys, hey, and I did this with a few people on the last video in the comment section, which I really like. Again, not naming names, but power to the people who started off being quite aggressive in their hate. And then I was like, whoa, let's take the hate out. Talk to me about some of the things you don't like. And when people are calm and just say, hey, I don't like the way that the dialogue lacks Tolkien's poetic etiquette. I agree with that. Hey, I don't like the way...
point.
Yeah. I don't like the way that the pacing has got major issues. Hell, I agree with that. What I take, it's these blanket statements. Show sucks. 1 out of 10. Oh, mate, go back to the shadow.
That's
Seriously.
that's the lack of understanding, or the lack of appreciation of the art side. And that's where the gatekeeping comes in. So as you know, I hadn't seen series 1 because I literally didn't watch it because it was panned by everybody. And that's my bad, because I literally just took that as gospel. When we started discussing about series 2 and coming on and doing this, I went back and watched series 1, and I really enjoyed it. The biggest points for me, and the enjoyable points, are the cinematography and the production design are absolutely stunning. And this is when it comes to you appreciating an interpretation and appreciating art for what it is. Not everything has to be, if it is an interpretation, it's someone's creative interpretation. And ultimately, these origin stories weren't written by Tolkien. They're inspired by his original books and what was obviously interpreted into Lord of the Rings. But then you get people wanting this to be exactly the same as Lord of the Rings. And how is that another creative interpretation if it's a carbon copy of what came before?
It's not. And I bet these are the same people, by the way. This is a really interesting point you've just brought up, because I guarantee that same group of people will pan that Lion King remake, you know, the photorealistic one, and say, oh, it's a frame for frame carbon copy of the animation. So you basically can't win. If you do a frame for frame copy of what already exists, you lack creative integrity. And if you take creative freedom, you lack moral integrity. So there's no winning. Like, and I don't say this, if you're one of the people who dislikes the show, that's absolutely fine. This comment isn't necessarily directed at you, but like, do some soul searching. Are you genuinely, answer this question internally or in the comment section, are you one of the people who hated the Lion King remake because it was a frame for frame carbon copy, and also hate the Lord of the Rings because it deviates too far from the original source material? That means if we're doing like a Venn diagram, like your sweet spot for getting something right is so small, I almost feel bad for you, because it means the amount of enjoyment you're going to get from entertainment is going to be so granular and so small. It's like, dude, I mean, fair play. You have a high standard for what you want from your entertainment, but also you're not going to find much joy. Sucks to be you.
It's not even necessarily a high standard. It's just their standard. Like for me, if you're using the remake of not Lord of the Rings, The Lion King as an example, I didn't enjoy that remake, but that's just me. There were elements of it that I did enjoy. And there was elements of it that I appreciated as art, but it wasn't for me. And that's totally okay from anybody to have an opinion. You can have an opinion, but just justify it, back it up. What's your reason for that? And for these people that have this very narrow window of what entertains them, why don't you go out and make it? You know, go and experience it for yourself. How do you, and I'm not saying that you're not allowed an opinion because you're not a filmmaker. That's not what this is about. You are allowed an opinion, but why do you have that opinion? Like you were saying about the comments that started quite hateful and then became a debate. There is nothing wrong with a healthy debate. A debate is healthy if it stays healthy. It is. I love a healthy debate. Let's talk about all these different points. Like, I'm not saying this program is perfect, but when I started watching it for season 1, as I say, my immediate appreciation was the cinematography and production design. And then I started analyzing what the acting was trying to do, and it was like watching something on stage. I could see it being interpreted on stage. It's very much theatrical acting. It's not your serious Scorsese type acting, because, you know, he as a phenomenal and legendary director as he is, he's very niche and he's very good at his niche, but he's very close-minded to any sort of styles around his niche. He believes that's all cinema should be, and I massively disagree with that, although I respect his opinion. And I would respect his opinion as a legendary director as much as somebody who just consumes this art. You know, those opinions are all very valid, but you have to back that up. They can't just be like you said, oh, this is rubbish, 1 star. Why? What's rubbish about it? What makes it rubbish? And
equally, other end of the spectrum, you can't just love something and give it a 10 out of 10. And this is another thing that kept on coming up in the comment section on one of the recent videos. It's like critics' opinions don't matter. It's like, I've written in response to all of those people who believe that. In a nutshell, the reason I would say pay attention to critics instead of fans is because just look at the comment section on the last video. Oh, I hate it. 1 out of 10. Well, that's incorrect. Oh, I love it. 10 out of 10. That's also incorrect. You've got to find it. Listen, you can have a high value. You could legitimately think it's a 10 out of 10, but again, opinions are all subjective, right? But
that's why critics will always have a place, because they critique. They actually do critique it, whether they like it or not. Their opinion as to whether they like it or not isn't the relevant thing. It's the way they analyze it and critique it, and the different elements that they discuss. You don't have to agree with it, but that's how everybody should look at something.
What's one of the key points of being able to analyze something? It's having a wide pool of knowledge. The thing I was saying to people repeatedly, and they couldn't wrap their fragile, bloody minds around this. On average, your average cinema fan, not someone who's a hardcore, not someone who will every Friday or twice a week or 3 times a week. That's a very small group of people who fit that bill. Your average moviegoer will see 4 to 15 movies a year. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and people are now turning towards streaming. Going to the cinema, your average movie fan sees 4 to 15 new movies in the cinema a year, and they're usually the big tentpole films, which is fine. All for that. Love me some tentpole. Conversely, there are also the people say they don't make anything original anymore, which is the biggest pile of nonsense in the world, but that's fine. Your average critic will see 50 to 150 movies a year. Now, when you see that amount of movies, you get to cross-reference information. You get to see, are there consistencies within this genre? Are there tropes being used? You start to look beyond just the whole, this movie is about XYZ, therefore I like it, and start to look at the whole, how is it made? What were the camera techniques using? How did they use the lighting? What were the script devices being used? You start to look at things that your average audience member who sees 4 to 15 movies a year doesn't look at. That doesn't mean they're more intelligent. It certainly doesn't mean their opinion is more valid, because opinions are subjective. It means the thing that is informing their opinion, they have more to draw on. Last year, I saw 70 movies. AJ saw 15. Who do you think, if we were to talk about was the year 2023 good or not for movies, who do you think has a wider pool to draw from? And that's
it's the more reliable. Yeah. And that's like we said before, it's not about opinion.
But people get hurt by that, and it's like, are you crazy?
I know, but that's where people confuse analysis with opinion. And I think that it's a shame that people are clouded by an initial opinion without insight, rather than at least trying to back up their opinion. There's nothing wrong with having a positive or a negative opinion about something. That's what makes art subjective, and that's what makes it beautiful, because if everybody had the same opinion and everybody liked the same stuff, it'd be pretty boring, you know? Yep. So hopefully we can encourage a bit more positive discussion, whether no matter what the opinion, and that's something that we'd love to see more of on the channel.
And positive discussion, Lauren said this perfectly just now. Positive discussion doesn't mean we only want to hear people who love it. No, hell no. If you didn't like it, please let us know. I want to hear from you, but tell us what and why. Don't just do a one-liner of this sucks 1 out of 10. I mean, go back to the shadow if you're cut from that cloth. But if you want to say pacing, dialogue, not really connecting with these characters because feels a bit flat. I don't like the way they're delivering their lines. I don't think the scene was directed properly. That I welcome on this channel. Give me all of that goodness. This is a channel for honest film discussion. Honest, which means if you hate something, that's fine. Tell me why and do it nicely. And if you love something, tell me why and do it without telling the people who don't like the thing you like that they're wrong. Everyone welcome.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Be nice. Be nice. Be nice. Don't be nerdrotic. Ha! Got it in. If you're still watching, great. Right, guys. Thank you.
We haven't lost
you. Thank you as always. Lauren and I will be back next week for the review of episode 6. Probably going to be a big banger, given that we've got a big battle coming. We're also going to be aiming to bring you reviews for The Penguin, which drops next week. And because Lauren requested it, we'll do reviews for Agatha. Oh, God.
Ignore him.
You're making me watch I can't believe you're making me watch Agatha. See, here's an example.
Hahn.
See, there are things I don't like. Right? There you go. I do like Catherine Hahn.
It's Catherine Hahn. And it's witchy, and it's September, and it's autumn, and it's all awesome. So, yes,
but it's a Disney Plus show from the MCU, and they're not good. Okay, fine. We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Let's not go into it negatively, right? Yeah, exactly.
We're going to be positive.
From your own cloth, boy.
Yep, exactly. I'm going to try. I haven't seen it yet. It could turn out to be fantastic. Just please don't be another. Oh, do you know what? No hate. Love. We're going to try and love Agatha. Let's do it. Let's do it. Man. Suck your own words, Nico. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching as always. We will see you on the next one. Lauren, thanks for today, mate. And I will see you next week.